I don't have some of the fans watching are West Michigan fans because we're on MILB TV.
Well, you got a great team.
Yeah, they do. And they would know maybe better than I do what changes the Tigers made, because for years and years we would play this team and they would have a lineup filled with college draft picks out of the SEC and the ACC who could not play. And somewhere along the way, they figured it out.
All right. Welcome to another special edition of our top 30, or top prospect breakdown. As we just did an update, our May update is now, whatever you're listening to is past May 31st, but we got it in just in the nick of time as we have a new number one prospect as Jackson Jobe has graduated officially. And before we get into the list itself, Chris, I think this is the first time in a while that we've done this where we've kind of put I guess some regulations behind guys who have spent some time in major leagues.
Yeah, I think we've done it before where we've never had a strict way that we do a cutoff. Before we've had guys who are technically still rookies, but we decided not to put them on the list because of their age or because of their experience or whatever. And this time, we just decided it's easiest to just say, all right, anybody who's been in the big leagues, whether it's Jackson Jobe or Tyler Owens, who's been there for all of 2 innings, they're just off the list. And it gives us a chance to put some more names on there, I guess, or different names. And it's just a way to, I don't know, just easier to cut it off that way.
Yeah, and I think going forward, it might be the way to go about it, only because I feel like that just gives you an opportunity to check out other players that maybe should be on the list. And there's also some really weird nuances. For example, Patrick Lee is not on this version of the list. And, depending on whose list you're talking about. So Jerry, myself, you, and Colin also participated in this. So everybody's list is very, very different. Very different.
Yeah, we should say that this time we actually had 6 people.
Oh, 6 people. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you mentioned me, you, Jerry, Colin, but also Joe, Rampy, and Ashley. We all put together our personal lists of 50-ish, our top 50-ish prospects in the system, and then we decided, if we kept it to like making 3 lists apiece, the list would have been like 51, 52 players long, and we could have done it. But the last time when we did this, it was me, you, and Jerry, and we said basically the player had to be on 2 of the 3 lists. And so sticking with that, 67% list rate, we decided that only players who were on all 4 of 6 lists, and that's how we ended up with 39. But yeah, there are a lot of players who got 3 votes, including Patrick Lee, who just, for whatever reason, they didn't get that 4th vote, and so they're off the list now. And we'll do, I said this, we'll do an article about guys who just missed, and then we'll probably do one about, sleepers again, where somebody who made 1 list, and we'll get that person saying why they wanted that prospect on the list. But and it's, I wrote a little article about the new faces and the guys who graduated and then moved up and moved dropped out and moved down and stuff. And it always feels like this list, we basically do a ranking 3 times a year, usually one around, Christmas time, November, somewhere around then. That's kind of our feelings after the Arizona Fall League and heading into the next season. And then we do one in August around then after trade deadlines and the draft, introduce some new names. But this is the one usually, this kind of 2 months into the season update that is the most interesting to me usually, because we're basing it on like 2 months of actual production for the most part. Like some of these guys are hurt, some of them didn't play, but it's an interesting list because, as we like to say, it's always like just a snapshot in time. And these are the players who were performing and interesting in the first 2 months of this year. And some of them are going to go on and be like even better. And we're going to have been low on them. And some of them are just going to kind of disappear. Like it just happens like, oh, that was just kind of a mirage. But it makes for a really interesting list, I think. And hopefully people dig it.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think if you look at the back half of the list, which we'll get to shortly, is an interesting lot, because I think the Tiger system, if we're being completely honest, is you look at some of the overall, or like the teams, what they're doing right now. The Whitecaps have won 7 in a row. They beat a very bad Dayton team. Dayton's not that, the red system, the high system, the Dragons is not that, they're not that good, or they haven't been as good. You look at what's going on in Erie right now. Erie is currently up against Reading. Toledo swept Louisville, another Reds affiliate. So there's some, you have to kind of filter that out and go, okay, so how deep is this system and how do they overall stack? And the system is good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, MLB Pipeline has as their number one team, number one farm system of all Major League Baseball. And look at the system day in, day out, you can see why. You can see what's going on in West Michigan. The nucleus is forming there, the quote unquote dream team from somebody that's told us within the organization. And they are putting together a product. But at the same time, the next step is, of course, the evolution, whether they contribute at the big league level. And right now, you look at the offenses across the system that are producing. West Michigan with one of the best run differential, not only in the Midwest League, but all of high A. Erie is up there as well. Toledo has turned it around immensely in the last. Toledo, to me, is the most fascinating story of them all because Gabe Alvarez has been able to do this with basically one hand behind his back, essentially, with a roster where he has had a veteran 4A club and he's able to do that pretty well. But the development. And then Lakeland, of course, you have Bryce Rayner, you have Franvier Montia doing his thing. I mean, he's been struggling a little bit, but he's still producing. And then it's just a combination of good pitching and everything. And then the FCL just kicked off, and the DCL, the Dominican Summer League, actually kicks off Monday. So there's not a lot of DCL influence on here. I'm sorry, DSL. Wait, did I say?
Yeah, no, DSL, okay, Dominican Summer League. Yeah. And I did put a couple guys from there that, we've been able to spy like a handful of Dominican Summer League scrimmages, if you will, spring training for them. And there have been a couple people who have caught my eye, most notably Yonan Koba, who we put a couple of his starts up on our YouTube page just because he's an 18-year-old who's got, mid-90s fastball, has touched 97 with some life. He's got feel for a breaking ball. He's got feel for a pretty nice changeup. It's scattered command, and he doesn't hold his velocity. But again, he's 18. He's the sort of kid that, he's the age of a draft prospect. And if he were in the draft, I think somebody would give him somewhere between like $500,000 and $750,000, kind of like a Zach Swanson level deal. So I thought, he's worthy of mentioning. But again, it's based on limited viewing, and who knows if he's actually becoming anything. But that's generally speaking, we don't like to talk about the DSL guys until we see them in at least in the Florida Complex League. So, yeah, not a ton of names on there.
Yeah, and that's where you want to see a body of work before putting on there. And I know that there's I'm sure we're getting questions about Chris Rodriguez and when it's been put out there, but they'll all come in due time.
I'm trying to see. Chris Rodriguez made, how many lists did he make? He made 3 lists. Okay. He was as high as number 10, and he was also 49. So that's, tells you sometimes about the difference of opinion on somebody. But if he goes out there and dominates the DSL, then we'll probably consider putting him on the list at the end of the year. I just think from what I've seen, it's still a little bit raw. His swing doesn't seem great. Like he's a bucket strider, it's a kind of steps toward third base and pulls him off the ball. You can see the physicality is there. The tools are there. Just, the hit tools, it seems it's probably going to be a little bit behind.
And do you think also, I think we talked about this offline. Do you think it has anything to do with also them getting more formal? I don't want to say, not that they don't get formal training, but a lot of these guys are so raw. Maybe they're just seeing what they have first, then they do the event. Like just instruction comes in.
I think I'm sure they're coaching them to do certain things, but usually the best tool to help you coach is failure. The player failing on his own and whatever he's doing not working as well as he thought it should, and it's a lot harder, I think, to get guys to buy in when they're producing. But that, hey, this is probably not going to work at a higher level. You're trying to get them to change. It's hard to get people to change if they're going out there and hitting 300 with power. So you let them go out there and see how they perform, and if they fail, then you can make it the changes probably a little bit easier. If they don't, then you let them go until they do fail. And if they never fail, then you go, whatever. Like we didn't have to change anything. Good for you.
Yeah, and those are the kind of things where I think the reason why I asked that question is because the Tigers haven't had. You look at the Juan Soto's of the world, like the international prospect to come out on there, the Ronald Acuña's, and so I love to get. Hopefully, we can talk to Garco about this someday, about asking him about the international process and how that works differently from something comparatively speaking to the FCL, where I think in the FCL you might have a couple high school. Yeah, you see more of a high school influence too, by the way.
Yeah.
With that, but so without further ado, let's talk about the first 5 prospects. We'll break these down in buckets of 5 to make things more digestible. But I did, if you listen to the intro for this, the audio comes from the Dayton. Who is the hold on? Let me actually. Who's the broadcaster for Dayton? What's that guy's name?
I want to say his name is Tom Nichols. I'm looking.
Nichols?
Let's see.
All right,
I'm looking.
real quick. Tom Nichols.
I think it's Tom Nichols. Tom Nichols is a Dayton Dragons broadcaster. He's been the voice of the Dragons since 2008. Yeah. He's called over 4,000 games in his career. Director of Media Relations and Broadcasting. Yeah, so Tom Nichols.
Okay, Tom Nichols. All right. Hang on, let me make a note of that. Tom Nichols. So the audio you heard at the beginning of the podcast was Tom Nichols and the voice of the Dayton Dragons. And the reason why we put that in the beginning... Sorry. Do the edit part again. The voice you heard in the beginning of this podcast was Tom Nichols, and I think we're going to say that audio going forward. And he is the voice of the Dayton Dragons, and it is a different system. And it's a very different... We've talked about this before. Again, keep this in mind. Yes, we are a Tigers-based thing. We're podcasts, we're a website, but you think about this for people that have been out there listening to us since 2019 or so. For somebody like on a national level to say something like they did like that was a good capture by you, Chris, because I really think that people, it's not just lip service now. People are going, holy crap, this is a different organization.
Yeah, and it's just really interesting to hear somebody from another organization say kind of what we always thought, right? Like, yeah, they just went after these players who were performing in the big college conferences, and he was blunt. He said that they couldn't play. That's the way it was. They were not a really talented group of players. Every now and then somebody would show up and be okay, but what we've seen over the last 2-3 years in terms of player development and drafting and all that stuff has really, the Tigers have jumped forward quite a bit, and it's evident to everyone in the Midwest League right now.
And it's funny too. We had somebody that I shared that screenshot with you about. They're like, oh yeah, that they were like, yeah, that tracks. It was like, oh boy, and that was an example of that there. But so number 1 is Kevin McGonigal. And that was, I think, unanimous across the board, right? Or no. There was 2 people that Max Clark, right? Yeah.
McGonigal got 4 first place votes. Max Clark got 2. But it's, and that's, it's a good problem to have, right? We've believed in McGonigal. We had number 1 or number 2 behind Jackson Jobe. So he just kind of naturally moved up, and he's been injured a lot this year. But what we've seen from him in the last 10 days or so is exactly what we expected him doing this year. He's hitting 500 through his first 10 games in the Midwest League with 8 doubles and a homer. He walked 6 times this week and didn't strike out once. He's just an incredibly advanced hitter who hits the ball very hard for his size, right? Like it's not like he's not putting up these crazy high-end exit velocities, but just about everything he puts into play is a line drive somewhere. He's just a really complete hitter. He's continuing to play shortstop. I think he'll be okay there. I think he can handle the left side of the infield if that's where they need him. His best position is probably going to be second base, but I think he'd be a fine, acceptable big league shortstop or even third baseman if he would need be. And he's an above average runner. So there's just not a whole lot to not like there. I guess you could complain about maybe the power ceiling. It's probably just going to be, average. But if you're hitting 300 with 15 plus home runs and playing in the infield, you're a good player. And I think that's what he's going to do.
especially when here's the thing too. It's not like just bat pip luck either. I mean, it's not just like soft singles that are dropping in between the shortstop and the outfield. Like somebody said that on Twitter, and I thought that was perfectly said because it's all hard contact. It's just, you know, you look at these laser shots, and here's an example of what I'm talking about here. So what we're sharing here on the screen is an example of what you see almost every single game from Kevin McGonigal. It's just a matter of him just going in there and
back again.
just
And the pitch.
So this is actually a walk right here, but it's a good example. I think it was an 8 or 9 pitch walk against Adam Serwanowski, who is one of Dayton's best prospects. He's a lefty with an interesting, you know, delivery there. But yes, McGonigal just battling. He got down 0-2, I think, and there's Max Clark stealing second, and you know, fouling pitches off. And I think he eventually lays off. Yeah, look at that. I mean, what a take that is. That's a slider, left slider away, and he just sees it and doesn't pick it up. And here's a little, excuse me, hit. But you know, when you put the ball in play like that, here's another one that's kind of like, well, you know, he hit kind of hard off the pitcher's glove, but then he goes bonkers. You know, we saw this 8 times this series, just hard line drive to right field. And then when he's not doing that, he's hitting the ball deep to left center or deep over the wall. That's his home run. Just a rocket shot. Not even a rocket shot, just a you know, high exit velocity, high launch angle, just impressive hitter.
And the takes he takes too. That's where you're talking about that. The reason why it's important to know too is even like the way he sets his feet too. Like it's the entire process behind how he goes about his game, and so for me, it was just an easy thing to really, you know, there's nothing 1A for him and Max Clark, and I know people what I don't understand is you see this more on Twitter, I guess. This is like. I realize that Twitter is just like 2% of the population, or less than that, as far as opinions go. People are always ripping on Max Clark, finding a way to rip on Clark for not doing A or B or C or whatever. He's still taking good pitches. He's hitting when he wants to. I'm not saying he's hitting when he wants to. He's a good player. Whether he's long-term left field, center field, that remains to be seen. But I feel like people, because Basoño, who had a really good week, because some of these guys are putting up some video game numbers, and Clark is not exactly, quote unquote, putting up video game numbers that are a lot harder on Clark. And I don't understand it when the makeup is there, as he's a very good prospect.
Yeah, you know, it's I don't know, like people, because of the way Max Clark is, you know, online and he's outward and you know, brash, I guess you would say, like not. I don't know. I don't want to say cocky, right? Like he's just kind of, I don't know what the proper way to describe him, but he's just kind of in your face. And so people there are people who want to see that not work, right? They want to see him fail. They're haters, if you will.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think it's fair to, I don't know, like criticize a little bit of his game. Not criticize, but like, and I've talked about this before. Critique is better. Yeah, the tools monster that a lot of people thought they were getting is probably not there, and that's fine because he's finding other ways to contribute. You know, he's walking at a sky high rate. He's going through a bad slump right now at the plate where he's hitting like 150 over his last 15 games, but he's still getting on base a ton. He started stealing some bases more, which we wanted to see. He's got a couple home runs in that span. It's not going to be a ton of power. The average, I don't know. He may be an average hitter, he may be a plus hitter, but it's going to be somewhere in that range where he's going to be completely fine hitting, and he's going to supplement that with a lot of walks. And he should steal, 20 plus bases a year. I think he's probably not the center fielder of the future. I think he's probably more of a left fielder. Just because I've watched him play out there a lot, and he looks fine, but it doesn't jump off the page like we've seen with some other guys. And his arm strength, I think, is not what was advertised either, right? Like the people had him as a 70 arm because he was throwing in the mid 90s off the mound in high school, and we just haven't seen that in pro ball. It looks more like an average arm. So the end result is like, it's not going to just be like these 60s, 70s across the board, but he's going to be average to above average at just about everything. And that's still a really good player, particularly if, you put him in left field and he becomes a plus defender there, then you're still talking, 3-4 win player in his prime. And that's outstanding.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with just if he's a player that can contribute on a regular basis, then that's fine. And I really don't think that, I think people are the overanalyzation of him all because he's not, or like he needs to be in AA already. Well, yes, you can make that debate, but again, the people that are behind the scenes who have all the metrics know. And so whether they're going to, from what we can gather based off of what we know and what we see, we can say, okay, well, him and Clark or him and McGonigal definitely belong in AA. In a case for like a guy like number 3, for example, Bryce Rayner, that's another guy who gets debated because, yes, he hits the ball very extremely well. He's very raw, and he's handling himself very well considering just out of high school. Somebody like, for example, Jude Warwick, who is also on our list, who's also really doing really well, but in a different way because where he was drafted, and we'll get to that a little later. But Rayner also, it's funny too, when an outfielder misplays it, oh, well, that's just a bad at single A ball. Well, okay, then fine, but he still hit the ball 107 miles an hour. Yeah,
and Rayner actually got 3 second place votes on our voting. He got 3 second place, 2 third place, and 1 fourth place. So I mean, we're all still pretty darn high on him. And he was, I think, 7th coming into this on our last list. We just hadn't seen him play yet. And boy, there's an awful lot to like there. We've seen, the consistent, incredibly hard contact. Right, it's probably 70 grade raw power. It's more like line drives and left center right now. So the over the fence production hasn't quite been there. But when you hit the ball that hard consistently and already at this age capable of hitting it that hard to the opposite field, that's a really good sign going forward. And beyond that, we've seen he's faster than I expected. I think he's probably a plus runner. And then the defense has been very good. Like, he's made some errors, as you expect a 19-year-old shortstop playing professional baseball would. But the arm is an absolute cannon. We saw, we've shown some clips of that. It's a 70 grade arm. I wouldn't put an 80 on it probably just because of guys like, Mason Wynn who exist. But it wouldn't shock me if Rayner's throwing triple digits across the diamond from shortstop. Like, it's just an incredible arm. So you've got all these really exciting tools, and he's a solid hitter. Like, I think the hit tool will remain the big question for him going forward. But he's 19 and he's got tons of time to develop and get better. So, the ceiling there is sky high. If he develops the hit tool to where he can, spray line drives all over the field and hit all types of pitches, and it's entirely possible, then he's like an MVP level talent at the big league level, just because everything else is there. Even if he doesn't, you're looking at a probable, regular at worst. It's kind of like Trey Sweeney, but hits the ball harder and in the air a little bit more. You're like, you could do worse than that. And that's the floor, I think. So you're talking about, I don't even want to think about the ceiling. Everybody makes the Corey Seager comps. That's probably unfair at this point still, but physical tools are there to be that kind of player. So really exciting to see him come out in pro ball and perform the way he has.
And I'm not saying exit velocity is everything either. There's a lot of other subtle nuances to it when it comes to it. But it just looks like a ball player in a sense of just even sometimes with the fielding of his position, sometimes maybe it's just the size of just the speed too. You're also looking at Harvard Westlake is a very good high school. The whole entire league that they're in is very good. I mean, you dare I say, better than some D2 or D3 school level. I mean, this is the kind of talent you get in there. However, the game still speeds up regardless. I mean, you're facing guys who are come from all over the world, and so it's just going to be the rawness shows. But I mean, again, to be his age and to handle it the way he has been great to see. And then Jose Bersueño and Tyrone Lozano.
So
I said it right all last week, and now I suddenly can't say it.
Tyrone Lorenzo, Jose Bersueño. We've kind of lumped them together for a while now, just because of they're out in the AFL doing monster things together. They're both catcher, first basemans. We think Lorenzo probably has a better chance to stick behind the plate. He's a level higher, and he's been struggling this year as we expected. Like nothing that he's done this year shocks us, right? He's a guy with a really long swing, but that's just kind of how he's built, right? It's
Right.
a long swing with a lot of power behind it. When he connects, the ball goes far. He hit his 6th home run today, right before we started doing this show, and you know he's doing fine. I think we'd like to see progress as the season goes along, but so far it's nothing that made us worry about him or drop him down a list. I don't think. And Briseño has just gone bonkers, and it's not really shocking to us, right? Like we saw this in the Arizona Fall League, and there was, I guess, some skepticism because the Arizona Fall League is a very hitter-friendly league, right? And the Midwest League is not. But particularly in the last couple of weeks, he just makes it look too easy. He got a 3 home run game with a double thrown in there, and he had a chance for more, but they pinch hit for him. He had a home run in the game before that. He came up the other night and hit a game-winning grand slam. I mean, it wasn't a walk-off because they're on the road, but he's just so dangerous as a hitter right now. Like they walked him 3 times. They didn't want anything to do with him, and I don't blame him. He's a very talented hitter with tons of natural strength who drives the ball. He can drive it out to any part of the park pretty easily. He's supporting tools. No, he's like a 20 runner. His arm is okay. He's looked acceptable as a catcher.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, you could keep running him out there as your catcher twice a week if you want. But I mean, the bat is what we're buying into here. And you could argue it's the second best bat in the system behind McGonigal.
Yeah, I mean, he's also calling his own games, which is, I think, is important to mention too. And for Tyrone, the biggest thing for him is the adjustment going to a higher level, and I think he's handled it fine. Like there's sometimes where like the bat seems like it's in a lull, but all of a sudden, if he, depending on what side of the plate he's on, he strikes the ball really well. He still works the count and is able to draw walks, and that the eye is still there, like you mentioned earlier. Yeah. But I think overall, as far as the catching goes, he's gotten better. There is times where, I mean, earlier when I did see him early in the year, when there was a lot of rain, a lot of cold, he dropped the ball up. I just think it was just a weather-related thing, and but he didn't seem like he was getting his signals crossed. He was on the same page as his pitchers, and it shows too because, I mean, in addition to the talent, Erie's bullpen ERA is under 2. I mean, that's impressive. And you have to give kudos to the catcher a little bit, even with the really weird, like we've mentioned this time and time again with some of the videos, the strike zone in Double A has been atrocious at times. It's like you want to, how about, I know MLB is not going to have the ABS until 2027 as they announced it this morning, but can Double A get the ABS, please? That'd be great.
It would be nice to get that, uniform across the minors, and maybe they will do that once they add it to the big leagues. But yeah, it's high A to Double A is still a very big jump in terms of the talent and the challenge it is. And we talked a bunch. Nothing's more challenging than being a catcher. It's grueling physically, it's grueling mentally, and then you have to go up there and you have to hit. And you're talking about a switch hitter, so you got to work on 2 different swings. It's just a lot of work, and I don't think any of us expected him to tear it up. Had he, I think we would have been like, "Whoa, you probably push him up the list more." But yeah, he's hitting probably under his weight right now. It's probably like 210 or so. But as we said, the walks are still there, the power's there when he connects. The strikeouts are high. That's what we expected. He'll get better. And the last thing I'll say about that particular quintet is you've got McGonigal, who is 20, doesn't turn 21 till August. You got Max Clark, who is 20, doesn't turn 21 till December. You got Bryce Reiner, who is 19. He doesn't turn 20 until July, I think. You got Josue Briseño, who's 20, doesn't turn 21 until September, maybe late August. And you got Lorenzo, who's 21, the old man of the group, doesn't turn 22 until July. So these are 5 really interesting hitters, and they're all very, very young and very talented, and it's kind of remarkable what they're doing right now.
And I'll say this with 100% confidence that the Tigers have never, since 74, 75. If you think about, I've often thought it'd be cool to do like a retrospect, like prospect show, like if we did like May 1975, if we were doing it on CB radio or like AM Gold radio or something like that, if talk radio was a thing then, and us talking about prospects, like, hey, that Lou Whitaker guy right now, he's hitting 324, but he's only got 2 home runs. Do you think he's going to hit for power? No, guys, I think that, just something like mock. Actually, I thought about that idea. This Alan Trammell character, is he going to be a Hall of Famer? No. But
you're heading into the year. Yeah, I wanted to write an article just because the prospect lists kind of go back to the early 80s.
Yeah.
I wanted to write an article to kind of look at to see who, what kind of prospect list they would have had there in the late 70s. But that's a lot of research and time will tell. But
and I do have that list. I do have those lists saved, by the way. Mm-hmm. I do have them saved among like prospect lists that because Baseball Cube has every single top 10 that Baseball America has done since 1984.
Yeah. So it would be fun to go back and do that. But it's a very good top of the farm right now. And Hao Yu Lee was our number 4 before this, and he drops to number 6. And it's not necessarily, he got off to kind of a rough start. He's really turned things around in the last month or so. And it's not necessarily like, him doing anything wrong, right? It's just, Rayner jumped ahead of him. I think Lorenzo moved ahead of him. And Briseño, I think, was there. Or Briseño was behind him too, I think. So, you get jumped by 3 pretty good prospects. But Lee is doing a lot of what we wanted to see him do. It just is taking a little bit longer. But again, he's another guy who's only 22. So we got to think about the age there, the relative lack of game experience, and starting to do some things that he was struggling with. Like earlier today, he had he pulled a fastball that was 95 plus. He hit it 106 miles an hour and he did to the pull field. He was not hitting any fastballs in spring training and through the first month of the season. So he's making the progress we want to see.
Yeah. And that's before we get to real quick, I just wanted to show example of top 10 from 1995. There's maybe you have 4 names on there: Clark, Higginson, Lima, Thompson, and that's it. Just as far as like major league talent goes on there. And then even then, like that's even.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, that ended up being probably a pretty good top 10. If you got, Higginson had some good years, Lima had some decent years, Clark was a solid pro, and Justin Thompson was really good until he got hurt. So, but that's about as good as it gets, right? Like you can go back to like 92 and it's, I don't know, like Steve Searcy or Scott Aldridge. I'm trying to think.
That's a good one. That's right there. Yeah.
You're just not getting talent for a long, long time. That even there was a small renaissance there in the mid 2000s with Verlander and Porcello and Andrew Miller and Cameron Maybin, but there was never a ton of depth. Your depth guys were Brennan Bosch and a bunch of random arms.
Yeah, here's okay. You know why this is weird too? Because Tony Clark, it comes up in 1995, but the reason why it doesn't come up in 1992 because he's injured. Because he had back issues. I remember that, and he was off the top 10 list. But look at the 1992 top Tigers prospect list here.
Like Greg Gore,
Justin Thompson, Rico Bronya, who was called up later that year, I believe, and then Scott Livingston, who had a cup of coffee. I mean, he was, I have no idea who Tarek Brock is. Same thing, just a who's who of who. That is honestly, sorry. I didn't even get off point about Hao Yu Lee, but getting back to Hao Yu Lee for a quick second, the thing about him too that is encouraging, you mentioned him hitting velocity. It adds to the reason why I was mentioning these past lists is that Lee represents the Tigers' depth in the infield, which I've never seen the Tigers have this kind of depth in the infield. Never. Mm-hmm. Never. I mean, honestly, Chris, you've done this longer than I have. And your duration, in terms of just looking at the guys they've drafted, where you were looking at this before, where you were kind of wondering, okay, is this guy going to pan out or not? Have you ever seen it this deep in the infield?
No, certainly not with good players. There was a time when you could say they've got Tony Giarratano and Michael Holloman and Cale Org and Scott Sizemore and Adi Siriaco. Look at all these wonderful infielders, and none of them did anything really. these are all. I don't think I don't know if any of those guys were top 100 prospects. We're talking like Hao Lee is a borderline top 100 prospect. We have him 6th on the list. It's just it's an embarrassment of riches right now. And if the Tigers want to make trades, there are guys that they can move where they won't feel it at all. Honestly, I don't necessarily think that Hao Lee is one of them, but if they have to part with him, they can do that and not feel too bad about it, right? Like he's got a lot of promise, but they also have 4 other interesting second basemen in the minors, and then they have Colt Keith in the majors, and just a bunch of different options. So it's a good place to be, that's for sure.
Yeah, and what's funny about that list, by the way, that 1992, as I just shared, 3 of those guys were on the Baseball America's top 100 list too.
Really?
1992, yeah.
Greg Gore.
Yep.
Bronya.
Thompson. Yep, and Thompson. But they're all like within the same cluster. So Gore was 79, Thompson was 84, and Bronya was 87. So there was nothing, top all that. But this is where let's just power through this last couple here in the top 10. Go ahead, Chris.
One more thing about Hao Lee. Before today, I'm looking at his numbers. In May, he hit 326, 421, 489. So 14 walks, 18 strikeouts, 2 homers, 7 doubles, a triple. So really, really good month, and that was after a kind of a rough April. So turning things around.
And one more note too. I forgot to add about this. So here, the question that among our staff, because Colin and I have talked about this too. Colin doesn't think he can play third long term because he doesn't have the arm range. Whereas I think he's serviceable at third, but I think second's more his position because second he plays pretty well. Like I posted a clip the other day of him making a really good play diving to his right, and then making a really good throw from his knees to get a speedy runner from Louisville. And so I don't know, like it's long term wise, it's almost like that's a question, where is he going to play? I mean, does he end up getting to the point where the infield's so crowded he goes to the outfield?
That's an interesting option there. I think he's actually an above average second baseman. He does a lot of things well there. You can just look at his numbers this year. He's got 202 plus innings at second base, no errors. Whereas he's 189 innings at third base and 8 errors. And it's some of it, I think, is he just gets sped up for whatever reason at third base. And so he's, thinking about throwing, so you might not pick up the ball cleanly. Or then he picks up the ball and then he's firing something in the dirt or over the first baseman's head. It's just not terribly accurate. I think the raw strength is there. I think he moves well. He's got good range laterally at both positions. It's just third base has just been a real challenge for him. They let Jace Young play third base, and he went out and got better. Like, you can see guys get better at third base, and I'm not going to discount Hao Lee. If he could play third base better, he might be in the Tigers soon. So that would be a big focus if I were him. But it might not be there, right? Like, sometimes guys just can't play certain positions. And if he's a right-handed hitting, very good second baseman, that works too. It just so happens to be a position that the Tigers have a lot of.
Yeah, and for once too, this is like you mentioned it just now. This is a system where they lose a guy, whereas before they lost a guy, they would feel it. This time they have actual depth, and so. Yeah. But the depth here's where I'm going to kind of question you on this. Is number 7 and 8 in Troy Melton and Jaden Ham, and the reason why I say that is because as far as the Tigers are going, they've been signing a lot of indie ball guys, and I did an article about that recently, and. Because obviously the way the draft is now, it's a shorter draft, so a lot more guys are going to be hitting the indie league and what have you. But if you look at the Tigers this week coming up against the White Sox as of recording, a lot of TBDs. And, Hinch getting grilled why Tarek School is not going more than 90 pitches in Saturday's start against Kansas City, and they lost. To May. First of all, I don't think it's overreaction over a game in May. Would you rather have him go 7 innings in October? Yes. Or 8 innings or a complete game? Yes. That's more important. Anyways, I digress. So the reason why I bring that up with these two is like those are your next frontline starters, because Hinch has indicated they like Troy Melton a lot. Whether he's out of, people will argue with me about whether Melton's going to be out of the bullpen or not. I've talked to John. We've had a couple mutual people who say, keep Melton out there until he can not start. Ham has been adjusting to Double A. He's still finding his way. He still wants to add velocity. But here's the next two arms, really, essentially, that are aimed at starters outside of what they have in Toledo's. And you know, you can look at Enos as a guy who may be temporary, but then, you know, there's the guy who threw today for Toledo. They just signed Nick.
Margashev. I always want to say Margavicius, but it's actually Margavicius or something like that. But the former big league time.
Yeah,
he's pitching really well. Yeah,
he's been pitching really good. So,
yeah, I mean, he could be the Brian Sammons. I always want to bring up Brian Sammons. We don't want to forget Big Brian Sammons.
Yeah, Big Brian Sammons
came up and actually pitched well last year.
Congratulations him making some big money in Japan, right? He's in Japan or Korea?
Japan or Korea. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I mean, if you were to point to a weakness in the system, it's probably, you know, a lack of frontline starting pitcher potential, and maybe a little bit, you know, outfield depth. But yeah, I think Melton is the best pitching prospect they have right now.
Yeah.
In terms of like as you said, there's still some debate about what his future role is, but there's a lot of markers of future starter to me. You know, he's big, strong, sturdy, holds his velocity, has no trouble throwing strikes. He has the requisite pitches. He's got 4 or 5 different pitches. He just needs to continue working on his command and kind of learning the finer points of pitching. You could compare him maybe to like Ty Madden, right? Who Ty Madden has all the pitches and he's big and strong and holds his velocity until he got hurt. But he just, you know, got crushed by lefties a lot, and it felt like he just had to move to bullpen before you know, getting injured anyway. And him coming back would add some potential starter depth help. But yeah, I think Melton is the one who could be, you know, if everything goes right there, he's a number 3, number 4 starter. Beyond that, I don't know if there is another potential mid-rotation starter in the system. Jaden Ham is struggling this year with a lot of home runs. He just doesn't look, he doesn't look terribly athletic out there on the mound. It's a funky delivery, and it just looks kind of clunky now. And as I said, you know, he's having trouble keeping the ball in the park, and he's going to have to work on that. He's still relatively young. I think he's only 22, but you know, the book on him is kind of out, right? It's what we saw last year is he throws the fastballs up and the curveball down, and if one of those migrates to the heart of the plate, it gets rocked. His changeup has improved a little bit, but I still don't think it's like a pitch that you have to worry about too much. And the slider doesn't do a whole lot. So he's kind of one of those guys who stagnated, and I'm not sure, you know, I don't know if he moved up or down too much on our list. I'm looking. Let's see. Where was he before? He was 10th before, and so now he's 8th. So he basically just moved up with the graduations of Job and Young.
It could be the case, too, where Ham might be just in a Double A, just similar to Melton, because Melton had a home run problem last year, too.
Exactly.
And this year's completely different pitcher. So it could be an adjustment with that. And to round out our top 10, Franvir Montilla and Roberto Campos. And Campos, I think, stayed the same, right? I think he was in
Let's see. Campos was 12 before, so he moved up 2, and Montilla was 11 before, so they both moved up 2 here. And a couple interesting cases where both of them got off to really good starts. Like Montilla had a rough first 3 games or whatever, but then got off to a great start, and he was humming right along, and then something weird happened, and he went 0 for 25, just like the wheels fell off, and he's still kind of trying to recover from that. He's playing better lately. He's walking a little bit more, and he's, causing havoc on the bases and getting a fair amount of hits, but he hasn't caught back up to where he was. He was hitting over 300 before that skid, and now I think it's back in 260 range. And Campos was really odd at the beginning of the year. He was hitting for a ton of average and walking constantly, but not showing any power. And then in May, he started showing more power, but the walks kind of went down and the average went down too. But it's, these are both guys who are at this level for the first time. I guess Montilla was there at the very end of last year. And they're just figuring it out. And again, these are young guys. Montilla's 20. Campos, I think he's about to turn 21 in a week.
Oh, he's
about to turn 22. I'm sorry.
22. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, he's still one of the youngest players on the team. So, and we've seen a lot of encouraging signs from Campos, right? The defense has gotten better, where he's playing some center field out there and he looks fine. And the walks, he seems to be recognizing pitches better, and he's hitting the ball all over the field. the only thing you want from him, maybe this is one of those things they always say it's the last thing to come is just more pull power, pulling the ball in the air more, and you're going to have more home runs. And if you do that, then you've got a chance to be a big leaguer.
And I get a chance to talk to him this week. Is we were been texting back and forth a little bit, talking about his background and from Cuba and my father and what have you. And so we were bonding over that. But what I wanted to ask him too is, like, it was something that I asked former Tiger and current radio play-by-play Barrio Garbe about, because Garbe, he coached in the minors in the Brave system, and he also has done hitting instructions. And he was talking about. I asked him when I was in the school bowl game last week. I asked him, so there's all these metrics about fly ball rate, and that's an indication of power to come. You tinker with the swing, and he said that for a guy like Campos, his swing's going to come. It's either he's going to hit for power or not, but you want him to kind of figure it out on his own, because you don't want to tinker with things too much. And so I thought it was a really good perspective on that, because you look at what Parker Meadows did, Winfield Perez, when they started hitting more air in the power, that was they started figuring out how to lift the ball more. And that was kind of like the final formation, if you will, with Meadows, with Perez, and that could be the case with Pacheco, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But with Campos, the same thing. I think that Campos looks a lot more comfortable than anybody else that's adjusted to the level so far. I mean, I think that compared to someone like Tyrone, for example, who's he's still hitting and still seeing the ball well, but Campos' game has evolved a little bit. I think that he has been able to adjust at a level where he is one of the youngest players. You mentioned he is one of the youngest players on his team, a veteran team, and he's going out there looking good among the veterans. And he's also making some smart base running. I've seen him go first to home, first to third pretty well too. And he doesn't, those mental mistakes we saw at West Michigan seem to be gone.
Yeah, it's everything that you would want to see from him. He's shown glimpses of, right? It's not always consistent, but the physical tools are there, and we've always been higher on him than I guess the industry.
Everybody else.
Yeah, and maybe that'll continue, but I think he's got a chance to be an everyday right fielder if it all clicks. He's got the tools, and I think he's showing some more of the baseball skills. And again, still relatively young. I think he's probably going to have to get protected on the 40-man at the end of the year. Maybe not. Maybe if you don't worry about him maybe sticking on a big league roster and the way that the roster is built now. But he's put himself in that conversation for sure. Yeah.
I mean, you would have to be a team like, I don't know, the Marlins to maybe the Marlins would do like they. I mean, they pull Hicks, but then I don't know, like I feel like the Marlins would do some dick move like that or something like that. Just like, yeah, we'll take him. And he is from. I mean, he does have roots in Miami, and he's Cuban. Give him a Cuban guy. It gives him a guy who's cheaper per se than maybe a player they would have to go spend on. Yeah. To be honest, so I don't know. I mean, I do worry about a team like the Marlins coming out of nowhere and pulling a dick move like that, just because that's what they would do. So, but anywho, hold on, let's see here. We'll take a break. Hang on. And here's the second half of our list. Hold on a second. So, hold on. Click like, subscribe. Make sure you click like and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Follow us on Twitter, as we've now hit 20,000 followers on Twitter. So thank you for everybody who's followed us on Twitter. Really appreciate that. It's all organic. No bots, no nothing. People just coming in, checking out our clips, checking out our website views, and we hit another high this year in May for most page views. So thank you so much for watching, participating. All that goes back a long way. And if you can donate a few bucks, do that too as well. Thanks. And stay tuned for the second half of our breakdown here in a second.